Welcome to the Listening Time Podcast. Hey everybody, this is Connor and you're listening to episode 114 of the Listening Time Podcast. Thank you all for listening. I hope that you're doing great today. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that I read about in a book recently. I actually listened to this book. It was an audiobook. It's a book called Never Split the Difference. It's a really interesting book. It's about negotiation. And recently in one of the advanced episodes that I recorded, I talked a little bit about negotiating at garage sales. And it got me thinking about this topic. And I remembered this book that I read about a month ago. And I thought, I want to talk a little bit about negotiation, about some different situations in which we might negotiate in the US, and some tips about how to negotiate. Tips that I learned from this book, Never Split the Difference. I think it'll be good for me to talk about a few of those tips today so that I don't forget them. It's always good to teach something after you learn it. It kind of stays in your mind for longer afterwards. It kind of solidifies it in your mind. In English, when we say that something is solidified, we're saying that it becomes more stable, more concrete. It's not gonna disappear, for example. So I'm gonna talk about that today. I think that'll be interesting. And remember that if you're interested in practicing with real English, English that is spoken fast, if you want that type of practice, then make sure to sign up to become a Listening Time family member, and you'll receive my advanced podcast episodes where I speak at normal speed, but of course I provide the transcript for you. So if you're interested in practicing with that, make sure to sign up. The link is in the description below this episode. That's patreon.com/listeningtime. And if you're a Spanish or a Portuguese speaker, you can also check out my ebook, my collection of 3 short mystery stories written in English and translated into Spanish and into Portuguese. So if you want to practice reading fiction in English, that will be a great resource for you. The links are in the description as well. And of course, you have the transcript down there. So click on that if you need it. And before we start, remember that it really helps me out if you share this podcast with anyone you know who's learning English. I'd really appreciate that. All right, let's get started. Are your ears ready? You know what time it is. It's listening time. Okay, let's talk about negotiation. So this book that I read, Never Split the Difference, is a book that was written by a man who used to be one of the FBI's top hostage crisis negotiators. So what that means is that whenever there was a situation where some person took another person hostage, that means that a person either kidnapped a person or they were robbing a bank and they didn't allow one of the workers to leave and they kept them there with them while they were robbing the bank or something like that. Those are situations when someone takes another person hostage. That's what that word means. So whenever there was a situation like that, this man who wrote this book might have been called to negotiate with the bad guy who took the hostage to try to get the hostage set free. In English, we can use the phrase set free to mean that you liberate or allow something or someone to be free, right? If you set the hostage free, that means you let them go. So that was his job. And so he was and still is one of the world's greatest negotiators. And so in this book, he talks about how to negotiate, how to always or almost always get what you want. And it's a really interesting read. I would highly recommend it. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the tips that he gives. But first, I want to just talk about situations in which you might negotiate, situations involving money. Because in reality, a lot of our interactions are negotiations. When we talk to our kids, when we talk to our spouse. So obviously there are many situations in which we negotiate, but I wanted to talk about some situations that involve money because in the advanced episode that I recorded recently, where I talk about negotiating at garage sales, I mentioned that there aren't that many situations in which we negotiate in the US involving money. However, I was able to think of a few after that episode, so I want to talk a little bit about those. The first situation is if you are at some street market or there is some informal vendor. So this isn't common in the US. This is not something that we have a lot of. We don't have all these different weekly street markets or nightly street markets like there might be in some other countries. In the US, this is much less common, so we don't come across this situation that often. In English, when we say that you come across a situation, this means that you experience a situation. So we don't come across this situation that much, but there are some times where there might be an informal situation where someone is selling something. And for example, like a garage sale, like I already mentioned, that's a situation where you can actually try to get a lower price for an item that you want to buy. So we can definitely negotiate at garage sales or maybe at some other informal places where